Hello, and welcome to today's violin lesson. Today we're going to be looking at number 91, Lightly Row. That's in the Essentials Elements Violin Book 1. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, with this one, what you've got is a part A and a part B. Okay? Um, both of the parts for this are pretty, I would say, pretty easy, because they both have the same rhythm. They both kind of follow this same eighth note quarter, eighth note quarter, eighth note, eighth note, eighth note quarter. They kind of follow that same pattern. So if you can identify the pattern, the rhythmic pattern for one of them, then you could easily learn the second one pretty quickly. And you can start with any part, really. What we're going to do for this lesson, though, is we're going to look at the part A first, and then we'll look at part B. So let's take the first measure. So in that first one, you have A, F sharp, and then G, E, E. Now, keep in mind you do have to use your fourth finger, okay, for the A's here. So we're gonna take this one just nice and steady. So it's gonna go something like this. All right. So what we did there is we did A F F G E E, and the F, by the way, is an F sharp. So just keep that in mind. Let's do that again one more time. So that is our first measure. Now we're gonna look at the second measure. So here we go. Again, make sure that that fourth finger is right there. Sorry. Make sure that it sounds exactly like that A, all right? Let's continue on. Now, if you'll notice, the third measure here is pretty much the same thing as what you had in the first measure, because it's still A, F sharp, G, E, E. So, if you could play the first measure correctly, then you could easily play the third measure without any issue, because it's pretty much the same thing. So, but let's go ahead and let's just try it, still going measure by measure. Okay, so that's measure 3. And now for measure 4. Okay, don't forget that the F sharp is a half note. Okay, so don't forget that. All right, moving along. Actually, before we do that, let's try doing 2 measures. So we're going to do the first 2 measures, okay, of part A, and then we'll try the next 2. So the first 2 measures. That's your measure 1 and measure 2. Now, if we want to go on to measure number 3 and 4, so here we go. Okay, now go ahead and pause the video right here first before you try to go any further. Make sure that you can play every single one of those measures just one at a time. And after you do that, then try to see if you can do 2 measures at a time. Okay? So, the first 2 measures, do those first. And then if you feel like you have a good, if you feel like you can play it pretty well without any kind of mistakes, errors, anything like that, then you can go ahead and try the measures 3 and 4. Okay, so so here is the next 2 measures. All right, so starting, we're gonna go on to measures 5 and 6. And by the way, we're still looking at part A. Okay, for this. So here we go. So measures 5 and 6. All right, that's measure 5. Now measure 6. Okay? Now, let's do the next measure, measure number 7. And again, if you look at measure number 7, in part A, it's the same as measure number 1 and measure number 3 because you still have A, F, F, G, E, E. Okay, so it's going to be like this. So again, if you can play measure 1 and 3, then you can play measure 7 in part A. Okay? Now the last measure, pretty simple. And the cool thing about this measure is it's similar to what you had in measure number 4 of part A, but instead of ending with an F sharp, right, that half note there, we end on an open D. Okay? So, but the eighth note pattern that you see there is basically the same as what you saw in that previous measure that looked similar to it. So let's try it. Okay, and again, make sure that you're doing a half note and you're holding it for 2 beats, right? So 1, 2, okay? All right, now, let's try doing measures 5 and 6 together. And then we'll try measures 7 and 8 and combining those two. So here's measures 5 and 6 of part A. So here we go. Okay, now again, pause the video right here. If you feel like you need some time to learn it, maybe go back, listen to it a couple of times over, whatever you have to do. Then when you feel like you're ready to move on, go ahead and do measures 7 and 8. Okay? Now, measures 7 and 8, all right, is going to go something like this. Again, this is for part A. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, and again, make sure that you're holding that for 2 beats, referring to the half note. Okay, now let's take it from measure number 5, part A, and we're going to take it from there to the ending. All right, so measure number 5, so here we go. So it's going to go something like this. Okay, again, pause the video right here. If you feel like you still need to kind of go over it a couple of times, that's fine. But make sure that you're playing everything in tune, all right? Okay, so now that we know part A, let's go ahead and let's go on now to part B. Now, as I said earlier in the video, if you can play the rhythms in part A pretty well, then you shouldn't really have a problem with part B. But again, that's assuming if you've practiced it well enough to where the rhythms aren't really too much of a big deal. But if they're not, then, and by not, I mean if if you're not able to play those rhythms as well as maybe you might would like to, then go back and just kind of listen to them again. But if they sound good, then you're pretty much ready to do part B. So, the first measure of part B, same rhythm as the one in part A, but now we've got different notes here. So instead of, we have a different set of notes, and what we have is this. So that is what you have there. Now, let's try the next measure. So here we go. Again, that's the second measure of part B. Now, let's try measure number 3. Bum, 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 bum. And just like how with part A, if you could play measure number 3 of part B, then if you could play measure number 1 of part B, then you can play measure number 3 pretty well because it's the same notes, same rhythm, right? I'm sorry, not the same. Well, yeah, it is the same notes. I'm sorry. All right, so let's try that third measure. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so that is what you have for that one. Now, let's try the next measure. So what you have is, again, make sure that you're doing it just as a half note, okay? Now, let's try doing all 4 of those measures together. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, and if for whatever reason maybe you can't do it, then go ahead and try doing it 2 measures at a time, which we'll go ahead and do right now. So the first 2 measures of part B, so it's going to sound something like this, and this is if in case that you maybe for whatever reason can't play the first 4 measures of part B, but if you can, feel free to skip on a little bit ahead in the video. So here we go. Okay, so that's the first and second measure. Now let's try the third and fourth measure. Okay, now if you can do those measures, then great, you're ready to move on to the next line. So measures, well, let's look at measure number 5 of part B. So it's going to sound something like this. And that's pretty much all you have. Pretty easy. Now, measure number 6, still part B. And if you look at those 2 measures, the rhythms are pretty much the same. 8th note, 8th note, 8th note, quarter. Okay? And just like how you had in measure number 2 of part B, same rhythm. 8th note, 8th note, 8th note, quarter. Okay? All right. Let's go on to now measure number 7. So it's going to sound something like this. Okay, that is measure number 7. And finally, measure number 8 will sound something like this. Okay, so we did all of those measures individually. Now we're going to try doing 2 measures at a time. Okay, so now measures number 5 and 6 of part B. So it's going to sound something like this. Okay, so pretty simple. And finally, measures 7 and 8 of part B. And that is pretty much all that you have for that. Now, let's try doing measures 5 through 8. All 4 measures of that bottom line. So here we go. Now, again, if you feel like you cannot do this just yet, go back and keep working with that same part of the video until you feel like you understand it a little bit better. Okay? Now, the next measure. So here we go. Measure number 5 through 8. Bottom line of part B. 1 and 2 and. Okay, so that is what you have there. Now, Let's try doing going back to part A just really quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play the entire thing. That way you can understand what it is supposed to sound like once you have it all together. So, part A, number 91. Okay, now that is part A. Now let's go on to part B. Okay, so if there's any part that you're still confused on, go back to the beginning and try to find a place, or even if it's in maybe the middle of a video, try to find a place where you feel like you understand it. But even if you need to go back to the beginning to kind of go over everything again, maybe watch it a few times, that is fine. But try to take it measure by measure. That's probably what I would recommend for this one. You could also maybe try doing it as like little phrases, which was the reason, by the way, why we did two measures at a time, because the phrases are a little bit, they are pretty easy to identify in this exercise. All right, so hopefully this helps you all out. Have a good day, and I'll see you all on the next violin lesson. Thanks.